You also want to keep in mind, this is a professional document. So you want to use professional language, with the exception of abbreviating states for employer locations and your location. You really don't want to abbreviate anything else. Things like degrees that you have earned, credentials that you might have, certifications you might have. You don't want there to be any confusion between you and the employer as to what you are referring to. You also don't want to use any personal pronouns on your resume. So words like I, me, they, we. This is not the place to include those. You want to be consistent with your resume formatting, and this is super important. So, for example, if you list your job title followed by the employer name for one position, you want to do that for all positions that you talk about. If you indent your bullet list one space under one of your experiences, you want to do that for all of your experiences. If you use square bullet points for one list, you want to make sure all of your bullet point lists have square bullet points and things like that. You just want to make sure that as you're looking down the page, everything is clean, everything is lined up, everything looks professional and nice, and it's just really easy, again, for that employer to decipher what you're trying to tell them and what you're trying to get across in a quick amount of time. For alignment, it is okay to center things like your name and the titles of each section on your resume. It's okay to have maybe your employment dates go along the right-hand side of the page, as long as they all line up and are straight all the way down. But everything else on your resume should be to the left side of your resume. So this really comes into play when you were talking about bullet points. You do not want to center your bullet points and make a list that's all every line is different lengths and things like that. It just gets really hard to read and sometimes can kind of come across a little bit messy to a recruiter. And then lastly, you do not want to include any personal information that is irrelevant to your qualifications and your background and your skills and your ability to do a job. So things like your height, your weight, your religion, your marital status, pictures of you, that does not belong on your resume. That does not affect whether or not you would be able to do a job and do it well. So do not include that. All right, so now that you know some of the basic guidelines, let's get your resume started even more than we did yesterday. So yesterday you created your header section and you typed out titles for each of the sections you're going to include. Today, if you need to, you can adjust the formatting for what you did yesterday based on the tips that you just heard, to give it a little bit more of a professional feel, again, if you need to. And then I want you to start filling in some of the sections on your resume. First, your education section. This section and every other section on your resume besides the header would have a title, as you can see here. And here is a sample of how you might format this section. As a current college student or soon-to-be grad, the education should be first on your resume right now, and JCC should be included first, since it is the highest and most recent degree that you are pursuing. If you graduated high school last year, you can still include it, but if it's been almost 2 years or more since you have graduated high school, take that off. And when you're including your education experience, you always want to make sure that you are including the degree type you are pursuing. So a certificate, an AA, an AS, or an AAS degree, what your major is, when you expect to transfer or graduate, and then of course the full name of the school and where that school is located. And again, here's an example of that. For the coursework section, you only want to include the names of courses that you have taken that are upper level and really relevant to your major and your career goals. You can see here that you do not have to describe the courses or include your grades. You want to just keep in mind that you can include both courses that were required for your major and elective courses that were outside of your major. It really doesn't matter if they were required or not, as long as you completed the course successfully with a passing grade and it's given you knowledge or skills that you can use in a career field that you would like to get into. This section is great for college students and new grads to include because it not only gives an employer a better idea of what you did in your program, especially if you're applying to positions outside of this area, but it also helps you bulk up your resume and fill in that first page like we talked about earlier. This is also a section that, 5 years from now, after you have a lot of work experience in your field, you probably will delete at that point, because at that point, your work experience is going to be a lot more important to the employer than the courses that you took. So again, just another way to illustrate that your resume is always going to be changing. All right. And then lastly, I want to focus on your experience section. Now, a big misconception is that this section has to only be jobs that you have had, and that is not true. In this section, you can include paid and unpaid experiences you've had that have given you essential skills and knowledge as an employee. Does not have to be, just jobs. So think about internships, field work, clinicals, volunteer experiences, clubs that you've been part of, maybe something you have been a leader in, anything that is related to your major, anything that's given you a really good responsibility, giving you a lot of skills, you can include here. Another really great thing to include in this section is applied class projects that you have worked on. So for example, maybe you had to design something in your AutoCAD class or program something in a computer science course. These applied class projects not only showcase your talents to an employer, but again, they help you fill in your resume, help you show how marketable you are and all of the skills that you have. So for today, you're just going to write out 4 key items for every experience that you want to include on your resume. You will actually describe your experiences in detail another day. So for today, you're just going to gather the information and get it put on your resume so you can fill it in later. Remember, if you are undecided in your major, or maybe you're, in your first year here, you might not have a lot of experience yet, especially related to your major. And that is totally okay. This is just a draft to get you started. And again, you will just update this over time, like we talked about yesterday, as you do new things. Okay, so this wraps up day 2 of Resume Week. By the end of today, you should have a lot of information filled in on your resume already. So great job. Stay tuned for day 3 and reach out to us at our email address here.